Hi, I'm Femi OK. You're in the stream.
And I'm Malika Bilal. Today, who will save the Rohingya? It's a story you, our community, pitched.
Now, unfortunately, the plight of the Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar is a story that we've covered several times, starting way back in 2012. These are some of the different episodes we've done over the years. So, why the Rohingya still dying? They're described as the most persecuted people on earth, and despite calls for help, the situation is worsening for Myanmar's Rohingya population. Over the past 2 weeks, roughly 150,000 Rohingya Muslims have flooded into neighbouring Bangladesh after a resurgence of violence between a small Rohingya armed group and the Myanmar military.
The mass exodus has sparked a major humanitarian crisis. Many do not have enough food or shelter, and UN officials say aid deliveries are being blocked and supply warehouses looted. And now the UN Secretary General is warning the situation is at risk of ethnic cleansing. So what can be done? And joining us to discuss this, Waqaruddin. He's the Director General of the Arakan Rohingya Union, an international coalition of Rohingya from around the world. Than Luen Tone, he's Chief for the Voice of America Burmese Service.
We also have Derek Mitchell. He's the former U.S. ambassador to Myanmar, now a senior advisor at the U.S. Institute of Peace. And in Brussels, Simon Ingram. He's the head of communications for UNICEF. Gentlemen, thank you for being on the show today. Let me start with a question, which is, how bad is it right now for the Rohingya, either in Myanmar or actually trying to get out of Myanmar? Have a look at this video from the UNHCR. Every time we invite you to be part of this conversation, many times we've done this show on the stream, it seems like the conditions for Rohingya are getting worse and worse and worse. Where are we right now?
We are currently at a catastrophic stage. The situation cannot be described worse than what's happening today. As you indicated earlier, the 150,000 have crossed into Bangladesh already, but we do not know exact number of how many are stranded inside Myanmar, in the forest, in the wooded areas, reportedly over 80,000+ people. You have seen the pictures in the seashores trying to go to see any help that can come with any kind of vessel. So this is a major humanitarian catastrophic disaster unfolding as we speak.
Simon, UNICEF in Myanmar, is your team there right now?
Well, we've had operations ongoing in Myanmar for many years now, and at least up until the 25th of August, when the violence first erupted, we had teams on the ground working right across northern Rakhine State, working on things like water and sanitation, nutrition programs, education, and so on. However, since that day, basically, it's been impossible for us to undertake any actual operations on the ground within Myanmar. And for the foreseeable future, at least for the time being, we're basically concentrating our efforts inside Bangladesh, trying to do something to help the people flowing across in such incredible numbers. And really, the pictures which you showed there captured better than any words could the true horror of what these people have been through, and just how incredibly difficult their situation is, arriving literally with the shirts on their backs and nothing more.
You mentioned the people that are fleeing into Bangladesh. This person on Twitter, this Operation Rohingya, blames that on the military campaign and says that those displaced need access to shelter, food, and medicine. Luen, I know that you have stringers and people on the ground. What are they telling you about what people are facing? Is it, and how deep and dire the need for food and medicine might be?
First of all, as a journalist, I have to insist that to have a kind of correct information about what is happening, so to let the world or other people who at stake, and also people who want to help to understand correctly. So, for example, like this number, I just saw it in the first in the videos, 120,000. But today's estimate is about 160,000 people across the Burma in a Bangladesh camp. But today I spoke to that. We spoke to UNHCR director in the region. She was just emphasizing that, saying that it is estimate. And also, they don't know whether, they don't even know that these people, Rohingyas, are actually from the area, or actually they are fleeing, actually cross the border or not. So my point is, okay, these are the number of the people over there. They are in a really in a crisis situation. But we need to understand that there might be a people inside Burma who are dislocated or has to flee from their villages. Not only Rohingya or Muslim, it is ethnic Arakanese or other ethnic indigenous people as well. The situation is about two communities. So we need to emphasize the problem about both sides of that situation.
So I understand what Kotal Wintu is saying, but we have to remember that these people, two groups of people, one Rohingya and one Buddhist Rakhine. Buddhist Rakhine have been moved to monasteries and schools and other places. The government gave them shelter. They are not in the woods. They are not in the river. They are not getting shot. So these are very small numbers. So Myanmar government is inflating the number, saying using both communities. Is truly one-sided.
Is it the Myanmar government inflating the numbers, or is it the aid communities and the NGOs who are estimating the numbers because they can't get to the areas where they need to actually say, okay, we can say with certainty. Journalists maybe can't get into Rakhine State, for instance.
That would be quite unfair for talking about those figures. For example, like, of course, there's a lot of Buddhist Arakanese or local indigenous people who had a shelter. But there's a lot of indigenous ethnic villages being also equally burned down and have to move and have to stay in the jungle as well. Their estimate number is about 20,000 as far as we understand.
Before this, at the beginning of the offensive, what military did was they're planning to assault Rohingya villages at the outlying areas. They're Mrong, Rakhine, and others. They have moved, they have relocated these villages systematically in the south of Maungdaw. Their protection has been given before the assault has started. This is part of the pre-planning. You know what else? I want to make this point. Myanmar government is dropping the food, bringing the food for them in the shelters. Okay, they don't have an issue, a humanitarian issue, crisis with food and medicine and water. But Rohingya people are running out of food, absolutely running out of food. I spoke to families directly. They said, we have one more day to eat. What do we do? They cannot get out, you know. So I think this situation is much truly imbalanced. We have to make sure that it's not the same thing between Rakhine and Rohingya people have been displaced.
So I hear you there, but I want to share this. This is from Deepak, who saw we were doing the story and wanted us to know the Rohingya issue isn't all black and white, they write. There's a section of radicalized Rohingya, they say, indulging in terror attacks against Buddhist and Hindu minority. So picking up on this point that there are two sides, perhaps. Derek, I know that you just returned from Myanmar about a week ago. Mm-hmm. What was it that you had access to? What could you see?
Well, I wasn't in Rakhine State. I went back to the country. I went actually up to Kachin State, where there's also tragedy going on with a military offensive and people in entirely displaced camps. So we also have to look at this in context of the overall country, which has been undergoing a decades-long civil war that has also been expanded, and people are suffering to the north and east as well as to the west. But that's not to say, I want to jump in and what was said a moment ago about numbers and relative tragedy. There's no doubt that the Rohingya are undergoing relative deprivation. The fact that they are stateless makes them a uniquely deprived and vulnerable people that need to be addressed. However, I think we do have to recognize the context. There's a question of the immediate humanitarian challenge that must be addressed, these 100,000, whatever number of people across the border or inside Myanmar need to be gotten aid and assistance. Then there's a longer term issue of how do you solve this? It's easy to identify the problem. It's much harder to solve. We're looking at a symptom of a long-standing challenge and a context that is deeply entrenched over not just the past 5 years, but many decades, if not centuries. And that's the question I think the international community needs to grapple with if we are truly going to defend the Rohingya over the long term.
I totally agree with what Derek said. But the thing
Simon,
is,
I hear you. We'll come right back to you.
yeah, the thing is that, of course, I also agree that you're worried about your people. But what you want to see those problems solved. So that the main issue is, even now, within your statement and my statement, our views a little bit of different from seeing the situation. Main thing is correct information, I insist, and also not to be misinformed or exaggerate things. For example, like there may be some sort of different reason or connotations about using a word genocide. So my question is, as a journalist, use of that ethnic word like ethnic cleansing, genocide, does it actually help the ground situation to solve problems or to get that two communities understand each other or to lessen that animosity?
Yeah, I get your point, but the thing is genocide or ethnic cleansing, whether it's helping or not is one issue. That's we have to deal with. But the thing is it happening? The question is it ethnic cleansing happening? As the villages have been rooted out, people have been forced out. Is it an immigration issue really? No, it's not immigration issue. There's a pretext. So, Kota Luntun like said, in misinformation. Aung San Suu Kyi said, iceberg of misinformation is helping the terrorists. In misinformation by who? Myanmar government is extensively involved, engaged, you may have seen that, in misinformation. You know, just a couple of days ago, BBC has a piece showing a picture. Let me make this very clear. I want to point this out. BBC has a piece that's showing...
Waka, hold tight for a moment. I am not going to discuss a former employer on this particular show. I care about you and what you have to say. I'm not going to bring another broadcaster into this conversation. Just hold tight for a minute, because I did say to Simon, who was trying to get in a little bit earlier, that I would allow him in. Simon, go ahead.
Thanks. No, I just wanted to build a little bit on the point that Derek made about the context in Rakhine State. I had the great opportunity earlier this year to do some reporting, direct reporting for UNICEF in Rakhine State and more broadly across the country. And what came through to me very clearly in Rakhine was the fact that all communities there are really victims of the incredible underdevelopment that state has suffered. Makes it about roughly really the poorest part of the country, where education standards are very low, the lowest in the country. Access to medical services is incredibly sketchy and thin, and where malnutrition is an ongoing and ever-present threat, especially for children. I think it's terribly important that we understand that this tragedy that's affecting Rakhine State, the impact is being felt right across the board, although of course we can argue about the extent to which one community or another is suffering more than the other, as it were.
I agree with what Simon said. It's a very poor state, poverty is rampage, but we are not talking about economics. We don't have time to talk about economics. We are talking about lives, saving lives. When you can save lives, you can talk about food. You can save lives, you can talk about education. You know, this is dire situation right now. I want to go back to that. I will not mention anything about the other broadcasting, but I do want to mention,
because I want to push on, Waka. But go ahead.
Yes. I want to make sure that I convey this message. I've seen the pictures Myanmar government they used propaganda as a fake news that